may not be suitable for all audiences.
We are fortunate tonight to have so many unexpected visitors.
Art 101 with Mr. Burgher.
Scholars, welcome back to another episode of Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher. I'm a professional artist and educator attempting to provide you with the best in art historical content. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, interact. Love it.
And why don't you sit down? You'll be more comfortable.
Thank you.
Friends, as you may or may not know, there's a new Indiana Jones flick coming out. And, that got me thinking. You can't really talk about archaeology and Indiana Jones type stuff without talking about James Tissot, the artist behind Indiana Jones. Let's jump into a little bit behind and the inspiration of James Tissot. Growing up, one of my absolute favorite movie heroes was Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford's character that made every kid want to be an archaeologist. But there's an artist who inspired the work that went into creating movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And one of the big names was a name that you may not have heard before. James Tissot was a French painter and illustrator who at the early age of 17 chose to pursue a career as a professional artist, traveling to Paris for an education in art, getting instruction from the likes of Hippolyte Flandrin and Louis Lamothe. He would spend his time in the Louvre copying the masters and becoming great friends with all kinds of artists, including James McNeill Whistler, Bertha Morisot, and Edouard Manet. Throughout his career, he would work in the styles of realism, impressionism, and academic art.
Look what you did! I can't believe what you did!
In the 1860s, Tissot would transition into a style that was a little bit more medieval, a little bit gothic. And when he did this, he would get some pretty high critical acclaim for his work in that style. Soon he would become the core figure in what is known as Japonism, which is a style that is highly influenced by the Japanese art, such as paintings and printmaking, and he, along with Claude Monet and others, really got this to be hugely popular in Europe, and many artists were influenced by the art of Japan during this time. Regularly in his paintings, he would add Japanese objects and costumes because he just loved it so much. He was putting a lot of that type of content into his works. By the 1870s, he had a reputation as a painter of women's fashion. During that time, he would move to London, England, and he was doing really well financially creating this type of art. Side note, it was during that time that he was invited by his good friend Edgar Degas to be a part of what would become known as the first Impressionist art exhibition that took place in Paris, but he refused because he was a guy that just liked to do his own thing.
Are you trying to develop a sense of humor or am I going deaf?
During his time in London, he did have some companionship. There was an Irish artist, model, companion who had several children, but one in particular he was claimed to be the father of, and her name was Kathleen Kitty Newton. And they would spend several years together, living together and so forth, but when she passed away due to tuberculosis, he just had to leave and he would move back to Paris.
Nothing shocks me. I'm a scientist.
The life events surrounding the loss of his companion very much would shape the direction of life that James Tissot would take after that point. He very much reverted to his Catholic upbringing and really focused on trying to get back some of that Catholic faith. He would be making paintings and prints primarily about biblical events, and this is where he begins to influence the work of the future with Indiana Jones. And in particular, these paintings of the Ark of the Covenant are based on the designs and illustration within Indiana Jones's Bible in Raiders of the Lost Ark. In his later career, Tissot was in production of some 700 watercolor drawings and paintings illustrating the life of Christ in the Old Testament, and these particular works were very much influencing religious works from that point beyond.
Not the man I knew 10 years ago.
It's not the years, honey. It's the mileage.
A trend that we see in a lot of artists is as they get older, they become more abstract. We see that with Picasso, we see that with Matisse, we see that with Mondrian, we see that with Pollock, we see that with lots of artists. But Tissot was a different kind of cat. He would go from somewhat rigid sort of paintings and drawings in his early career to becoming more abstract and then tightening back up and returning to this traditional or representational style in watercolors. He wanted to capture what he believed was a true image. He would travel to the Middle East and create study after study of the actual lands where these events may have taken place, using those studies as reference materials within his paintings and artworks. At the time of his death, he was still working on this huge series of religious works. And again, these images would provide the foundation for the artwork that would influence the materials that were in the Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981, as well as several other films. But in this first glimpse at the character of Indiana Jones, I think it's fairly safe to say that a big part of who Indiana Jones is as an appreciator of art, as an archaeologist, is somewhat framed by the artistry and the expertise of one James Tissot.
Hope you appreciate that as much as I appreciate being able to bring it to you. See you next time. You stay safe out there.
To date this find as we have. Any questions then? No, okay, that's it for the day then.